Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we'll tour the Mille Lacs Indian Museum in Minnesota. But first, joining me now is Jessica Thomason, the new CEO for Lutheran Social Services. Jessica, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as we get started, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I am a lifelong North Dakotan, so I grew up on a farm right between Park River and Grafton, which is up in the very northeast corner of the state. Actually, both my husband and I went to school in Park River, and our families are still up in that part of the state as well. So this is definitely home for me. We've been in Fargo for about 15 years.
And of course, now, how did you become involved with Lutheran Social Services?
You know, you can never script the path that your life will take, is what I've found. But it's been an interesting opportunity that I really couldn't have predicted would have come up. So I worked for the city of Fargo for just about 10 years and was their community development planner. And it's kind of a strange job. Not a lot of people know what it does, but really in a nutshell, it gives you a chance to figure out how communities work, how things work together. And so you get to really dig in and figure out what does it take to make a good neighborhood, and what is a successful downtown, and what role does historic preservation play, and what do you do about homelessness planning and affordable housing? And so it's this really comprehensive look at how people live together and what it takes to help people thrive. So I did that for just about 10 years. Worked for Fannie Mae for a little while, again working on affordable housing, primarily on some of the reservations around the state of North Dakota. And then an opportunity came up at Lutheran Social Services, and they said, we would like to do more in the area of affordable housing around the state. Would you be interested in helping us do that? And I said, I would. I always wanted the opportunity to work in communities across the state, and this was a great chance to do that for an organization that really, a lot of places say that they serve the whole state, but I found early on that Lutheran Social Services truly does. We have staff in every county, and so I thought, you know what? I'm gonna do that. And then the opportunity to move into the CEO role came, and it felt like the next step on that path.
Well, I understand you've been in the role a couple of months now.
Yes.
Talk about sort of the transition of taking over from longtime CEO Bob Sanderson.
I've been very fortunate that Bob is generous with his time and generous of spirit with this organization. So he wanted to share everything that he could to make a smooth transition, and I'm grateful for that. For anybody who knows Bob Sanderson, oftentimes he's just known as Bob because he's such a great visitor of people and connector of people. He made it a real point to ensure that Lutheran Social Services was truly connected to the people in the state of North Dakota. And it's a big state, as you know. I mean, he put on more than a couple 100,000 miles on that car of his from the time he started, going out and visiting with pastors, visiting with people in communities, donors and clients, just to talk about what they wanted to see our organization do, to learn about what their challenges were, and to try to bring that back and to see if there was a way that we could work together to help make those communities a little bit better places to be.
Okay. Well, obviously Bob provided a lot of contributions to the agency over the years. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can highlight even one or two of those, but then, well, go ahead and then of course, what are your goals for the future? Kind of tie those in maybe.
Yeah, it's really, I think, a blessing to be able to step into this position after having been at the organization for a few years, because you had a chance to be part of some of that building. So one of the things that I know Bob was really proud of is being part of the work of expanding the Healthy Families program, which is a pretty amazing, it's an at-home visiting program for young parents, parents of young children. And oftentimes those families might be at risk of child abuse or even out-of-home placement. And Bob spent his whole career really fighting for kids and fighting for families. And Healthy Families is truly an amazing program. It's evidence-based, so you can kind of prove the impact it has, and he put his heart and soul into that. And I'd say one of his other real legacies was having the courage to say, you know what, we're going to jump into the arena of affordable housing when a lot of other people weren't willing to do that at the time. Most of our work happens in smaller communities around the state where there maybe aren't as many, developers who are interested in trying to tackle those challenges. And he, along with the board of directors, said that is in line with who we are and what we do. And so he had the courage to do it. And I think that's something that will have a legacy for many years to come.
Well, now, so you're starting your
Yeah, so
legacy.
me, so-
What are your goals going to be, or are you still evaluating those? I'll be fair to you.
No, actually, again, I had the benefit of being part of many years worth of conversations within the organization. One of the other things that Bob did is he really pulled together the leadership from across the agency and said, we're almost 100 years old. We'll be 100 years old in 2019, so just a few years away. So as we get ready to embark on this next century of service, who are we? And who does a nonprofit, what does a nonprofit organization that serves a state like North Dakota need to look like in that next century? And so we have talked about that for 3 or 4 years. What is our vision? And I think we've come to a good place where we have maybe an even deeper understanding of who we are and what our greatest potential impact is. And so I intend to kind of to try to make some of that vision casting a reality along with the other leaders at the organization. So I mean, just a little bit about what that is. We're a multi-service organization, so we do a lot of different things, and I know we'll talk about them as we visit. But it's hard to wrap your mind around an organization that does 17, 18, 19 different things and really figure out what is our impact. And so that's what we set our minds to is, okay, we do a lot of good things for people. We're well received by the people that we serve and all of those things, but who are we? And so we came down to kind of some key levers, if you will, that we think will help people thrive, which is really our unifying goal. Our mission statement is still our overarching value, which is guided by God's love and grace. We bring healing, help, and hope. That is still who we are. But I think when it comes down to it, our work helps people thrive. People, whether they are young families with children, whether they're older adults who are sort of entering that next phase of their lives, whether they're a working couple that's trying to find a place to live and to make ends meet. Our goal is to try to help people thrive. And so we have a few different areas of impact that I think you'll see even greater attention on in the coming years from our organization. Healthy and supported relationships, particularly for young families and for families with older adults who are making a transition. Helping families find quality childcare, helping to create more housing opportunities for people, and working more with seniors and behavioral health and counseling. So I think we'll really have a much more streamlined way of thinking about the work we do, and I think that will. I think that'll serve us well.
Well, with that said, how many employees do you have? You mentioned offices. How many counties and employees do you have?
Yeah, we have just about 350 employees. About half of them are full-time and half are part-time, but we actually have staff working in every county in North Dakota, which is it's important for us to be able to actually deliver the services that we do. We actually have offices in 6 of the regions of the state. So we aren't quite in every region, but we have offices in 6 regions. And then housing projects with smaller offices in several others. So we really are committed to serving North Dakota, and not just the largest population centers, but truly communities across the state.
Mm-hmm. How difficult is it to get all of that together? I mean, when you're spread out like that.
Yeah, I would definitely not profess that we have it down pat, that it's perfect, but it is, it's kind of a challenge that we have set before ourselves. And we were having some conversations with stakeholders last fall. And one of the things that we heard many times was, if your services are so good and they're good enough to be in, say, in Fargo or in Grand Forks, how can we bring them to people who are living in Stanley or in Crosby or Tioga? And I think that is an excellent question. And we just have to figure out, how do we deliver services maybe a little bit differently? How do we make use of our network? We're tied with Lutheran churches all over the state of North Dakota. That's a tremendous network of organizations that share a similar belief. So maybe there are things that we do together to kind of to shape how we look in the next century. So I think, we're trying to figure out how do we better connect with each other as staff, with our partners, with the communities we serve. Technology is certainly helping us. But there are still a lot of miles that you put on in the car, and thankfully I love the prairie sky. So it doesn't bother me one bit. It's kind of a really nice time to reflect and to think, and so there's nothing like windshield time, but technology's helping.
Well, it does, for all of us. You talked about coming from the housing background of LSS. Can you talk about a little bit about that position and what it entails?
Sure. I worked as the director of the housing company for, well, I actually still am. You're the CEO of both. When you hold this role, you're the CEO of both. But I helped to get that part of our organization started. And we've grown from, a staff of 1 to more than 20 men and women who kind of help us both develop housing but manage it as well. And so, in a nutshell, that part of what Lutheran Social Services does, we focus on rental housing, primarily in rural communities, and we want to make it as affordable as we can for people of a variety of income types. So not all of, one of the misconceptions people have is that all of our housing units are low income, and that really isn't true. We do a mix of some subsidized units, some for low and moderate income, and then some just for people of any income. And we do that intentionally. I think it is rooted in our understanding of rural places and of North Dakota, that oftentimes, or more often than not, we are used to, we live together. We're not often separated by income or by, any of those false boundaries. And so we set our housing projects up the same way, that they're pretty integrated, mixed income, just a good quality place to live. And that's what most North Dakotans are looking for, I think. And so we have projects in, I think more than 15 communities now, about 500 housing units that we own and manage, and then another few hundred that we manage on behalf of others who have a similar mission to provide affordable housing, and they're maybe looking for some assistance that way. So it's grown from an idea to, I think, a key part of who we are going forward. Honestly, housing is it's a basic need. So it's important that families have access to good quality, affordable housing, but we know that's not the only thing they need to help them thrive. And frankly, that was the reason I chose to apply for this job, to be the CEO, because I think Lutheran Social Services is one of those organizations that maybe has an opportunity to try to connect those dots in new ways and to figure out, how do you help wrap services around people who need it regardless of where they're living, and how do you just try to make things more seamless and more integrated for people, again with this unifying goal of helping them thrive in whatever way that might take. So.
Okay. Well, you mentioned you're coming up on 100 years old in 2019.
Yeah.
So you've given us some background, but can you tell us a little more about the history of the organization?
Sure. Yeah, it's a very interesting history. Lutheran Social Services in North Dakota actually started out as one of the organizations that used to be known as a Children's Aid Society or a Children's Finding Home, where they would help. I don't know if you've seen the book Orphan Train, or if you've heard of Orphan Trains, but similar to that, where they tried to help orphaned children find safe homes, and that was in the early 1900s. Adoption has also been with our organization since the very beginning. We've been helping families adopt since the day we opened our doors, and continue to do that today. It's frankly one of the most long-standing ministries that we have, and some of the stories that adoptive families share with us over the years are really pretty amazing. So started out with kids. I think that's a simple way to say it, is the Children's Aid Society and adoption. We've been doing refugee resettlement work since the 1940s. Started that after World War II and continue that today. It of course looks different than it did then, but that's been a part of our ministry for a very long time. And also have a long history providing a variety of counseling services or supports to families, basic needs, whether it is food or housing. Sometimes there are more intensive counseling options. Luther Hall is an example today, and maybe we can talk about that later. But it's an organization that is known for its ability to change with what the state needs. So Lutheran Social Services of North Dakota is its own organization. We're our own nonprofit, but we're part of a network of Lutheran service organizations around the country. So you will find, an LSS in Michigan, and you will find one in Minnesota, and a couple in Ohio, and you'll find them all over, but everybody looks a little bit different. So, and I think that's an interesting model, because really it allows those organizations to become what best serves their state's needs. None of us want to duplicate services that already exist. If there's an organization that is already doing, pick the service in-home counseling in North Dakota, you don't need us to come in and save the day, so to say. What we're here to do is to try to find a way to help people improve their lives in whatever way they need. So Michigan's organization looks different than ours. Minnesota's looks different, but what we have in common is kind of this shared value of social ministry and of helping our neighbor and helping people thrive.
Okay. So again, for your organization then, who and what clients do you serve today?
You know, we have, I don't know that there are too many populations that we don't serve in some way, which is really, really interesting. So you'll have a large part of our work is with families, with children, all the way from infant. Our Healthy Families program starts working with families in the prenatal, all the way up to age 3. A lot of our other youth-focused programs work with adolescents and kids who are entering high school and their families. We work with, you know, just working adults. They don't have to have children to avail themselves of our services, so maybe in our gambling addiction program, it could be in the housing program. And then we work with seniors as well. We have the Senior Companion program that we've actually operated in North Dakota for almost 30 years. And work with older adults all over the state on both sides of that transaction, which is kind of cool, and I hope we have a chance to talk about that too. But both the older adult that is seeking companionship and maybe doesn't have a support system around them as much as they'd like anymore, and the older adult providing the companionship. So it really is sort of on both sides of that transaction, and there's some really great relationships that are built, and you know, the purpose of that program is to help people live independently as long as possible.
Well, we are going to run out of time
Yeah,
here
sorry.
pretty quick. No,
Yeah,
no,
you
but
just stopped
you
me.
mentioned Luther Hall.
Yeah.
So tell us about Luther Hall.
Yeah, Luther Hall is it's a facility that we have in Fargo, but it actually serves kids from all over the state of North Dakota. We provide residential psychiatric treatment for adolescents, age 10 to 18. So it's a pretty broad range of kids, both boys and girls, stay with us, and they typically come to stay with us at Luther Hall for, anywhere from 6 to 9, 10 months. They go to school on site. We really become their home, away from home. And they come with us because they're trying to find their way to stability. They may be struggling with mental health issues, oftentimes fairly significant issues that have really made it difficult for them to live stably at home or to be successful in school. And so they come and stay with us at Luther Hall, and the staff there are extremely compassionate and skilled at helping these kids find themselves. I don't know a better way to describe it than that. We work also with the families whenever we can, and as much as we can, to help them know how they can best succeed together when their young person does come home. So it's a very long-term relationship that we develop with people through some of the most difficult times in their lives. And you know, we don't fix everything when they come through the door, but we certainly help them find their way to hopefully thrive. And again, that's part of our goal. It's just their thriving may look different than it does for some others.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, you've talked about you have addiction counseling programs, you have family counseling, of course, the troubled youth. But I'm just going to ask it now, sort of open-ended.
Yeah.
What other services would you like to talk about for just a minute or so here?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think we've hit most of them. We really are. We are a pretty dynamic organization, if I do say. You know, we have all sorts of nooks and crannies of very passionate staff who are doing everything they can in their own little corner of the world, and the stories they tell are pretty great. We're going to try to do a better job of telling some of those stories on our website and social media with some video and some things that maybe will help people engage with the work we do, because they're pretty fun stories.
Yeah. When you go out in the public with some of that windshield time you talk
Yeah.
about, you know, what kind of reaction do you get from people and from the communities that,
Yeah.
that you're serving out there?
Well, we're very blessed in that I would say we are overwhelmingly supported by the people who know us and know our work. I think there are a lot of people who still don't know us, even though we've been around for 100 years, or they may only know one thing that we do, which that is absolutely to be expected. And there are also those who aren't happy with the work we do, and we would expect that as well. So our goal is to try to be as open as we can about what we do and why, and to be respectful of the people that we work with and the communities we serve. And yeah, hopefully the next 100 years of service, we can continue that tradition.
Well, Jessica, finally, I guess if people want to find out more information about Lutheran Social Services or what all you do, where can they go? Who can they contact?
Yeah, you can always contact one of our offices if they happen to be near where you are. We have offices in 6 different regions in the state. You can always call. There's a main number that's published, I think, in most places you can find it, and the web. hopefully we're going to be hard not to find. So we'll try to do a good job of making it easy to connect with us. But yeah, give us a call if there's anything you need to know.
Well, Jessica, we wish you the best of luck in your
Thank
new
you.
position.
Thank you. So nice to talk to you.
All right. Stay tuned for more. One of the more impressive Native American museums in our region is just outside Onamia, Minnesota. The Mille Lacs Indian Museum has historical artifacts from the Mille Lacs tribe in central Minnesota. And here's a tour of the museum.
The Mille Lacs Indian Museum started out as a trading post, and the trading post is still an active trading post. We buy and sell and trade items with American Indians. Sell a lot of handmade items made from traditional materials and pretty much using a lot of the traditional methods that have been handed down from generation to generation. Today we have not only a trading post but also a state-of-the-art museum. And the main exhibit area really talks about more contemporary issues that American Indians and specifically the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe are involved with. Our Four Seasons room a lot of time is talked about as being one of the best dioramas of any museums anywhere of American Indians, and which is a life-size diorama of how the Ojibwe lived a couple hundred years ago. And in that room we talk about cyclical living, kind of the cycles of the seasons, how the Ojibwe would sugar bush in the springtime, fish in the summer, harvest wild rice in the fall, and then make winter camp and trap and ice fish and different things like that. The Minnesota Historic Society has ran the site since 1960. Prior to that, it was a trading post that was run by Henry and Jeanette Ayers. When they actually donated the land, the buildings to the Minnesota Historic Society, they also donated a collection of 2,000 items that they had amassed over their time of running the trading post. So a lot of the items that you see in the museum are part of the Ayers collection, it's called. And a lot of those items date back turn of the century, so about 100 years old. The new museum was built, and which was opened in 1996. The Minnesota Historical Society worked very closely with the Mille Lacs Band members and the community, and so there was things specifically made just for the exhibits, like some of the dance outfits you'll see in the regalia in the Living Culture exhibit, for example. More recently, in the last, I would say 5-10 years, is cultural preservation has taken a priority among tribes, especially when you have the loss of language, when you have a lot of elders passing away that, you know, maybe are the last ones that make a certain item or knew how to do things a certain way. So I think that you're going to see more and more museums like this coming up on Indian reservations and in Indian country. The Mille Lacs Band moved into this area about mid-1700s. Prior to the Mille Lacs Band settling around Lake Mille Lacs, the Dakota called this their homeland. And the Ojibwe that settled here were actually part of a longer migration that came from the East Coast. And today you can find, you know, Ojibwe throughout Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, that type of thing. So Ojibwe are a very large tribe in North America. But the Mille Lacs Band has been here since the mid-1700s. You know, there's been struggles historically, one getting recognition of the reservation here. Another thing that, you know, was predominant in the 1990s was the hunting and fishing rights, a Supreme Court case that the Mille Lacs Band brought all the way to the Supreme Court and won to affirm their rights to fish. We get about 13,000 visitors a year here. It's interesting, we get people from all over the world, really. We have a world map up at the front door and we ask people to put pins where they come from, and we get people from 50 different countries each year. So the reaction is really positive. People really like coming to the museum, especially people if this is their first time coming through. We also offer workshops and special events. We have a powwow each year. We have an Indian art market. We do different crafts workshops so people can learn how to make moccasins or Ojibwe mittens, sweetgrass baskets, different things like that. And those are very well received too. People really enjoy doing those. One of the things I think that's important for all museums that talk about American Indian content is to highlight that it's a living culture, because a lot of times we want to place American Indians in the past, and so by the Four Seasons Room we talk about the past, we talk about a couple hundred years ago, and that's good for people to know, but it's also just as important that people know that we're still living these traditional ways. There's still people going out harvesting wild rice, there's still people tapping the maple trees to make syrup and sugar out of each year, netting, you know, that type of thing, so that these ways are still alive, you know. And a lot of times where these ways can really continue to live and even strive is on reservations, because you have that place where you have the cultural knowledge and you have the cultural resources to do those things to keep those ways alive.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse for this week, and as always, thanks for watching.
Funding for Minnesota Legacy programs are provided by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, and by the members of Prairie Public.